Thanks for the timing, for your patience. We will start the section now. Today, we are pleased to invite Professor Arnold Tukker from the Leiden University and join us to share the learning from the Netherlands sections. And we will, first we will have our director, Jingming, to give a brief remark about these sections, and then we will go for the 25 minutes around for the presentation. I will be control the presentation, and we will have remain around 20 minutes, 25 minutes for Q&A sections, and we'll have no closings today. So maybe I just give a very short introduction of Professor Arnold. So he's the well-known professor in the Leiden University, and then he has been working in the field on the circular economy and the industry ecology for many time, and he's now the director for the Center of Sustainability in the Leiden University, and also having, of course, he's the professor in the university, and also being a visiting professor in Indonesia University, Bandung, and then the President's International Fellow of the prestigious Chinese Academic of Science. Yeah, sorry. And then the I just about the Center of Sustainability, and then that's it. And then I will give the floor to Jingming, and then we pass to Professor Arnold. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry. Welcome, Professor Tukker. Yeah. I listened to your presentation this morning with our another sector group, and it's very comprehensive, covering a lot of things. And this afternoon, we welcome you to give us another talk focusing on the solid waste management. You know, we are water and urban development sector, and our work mainly covers the water supply, sanitation, and also the solid waste management, which becomes more and more mainstream in our portfolio. And specifically in Asia, there are 5 countries who are responsible for about 50% of the world's total marine plastic. China, Indonesia, Philippines, Thailand, and Vietnam. Of course, no one in Central West region, because my team covers the Central West and East Asia. Yeah, East Asia includes China. So we really look forward to your presentation about solid waste management. We also want to learn what is a better choice, because now many decision makers would like to use waste to energy, specifically in the middle countries such as China, Vietnam. We can see it becomes a very major trend. What's the purpose of the waste to energy? Is that for energy generation, or is for waste management? So we want you to share your experience. Also, we understand you have a lot of experience in Asia, China, Indonesia, and also Thailand. So if you can share with us how to connect such experience with our projects, so you'll be really useful to us. So we look forward to your presentation and sharing your insight, from your long history of the sector work. Okay, welcome.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for this nice introduction, all of you. And maybe you control the slides.
Yes.
So maybe the next one. No, you got far. Yeah, you did too. Maybe let's start with the Leiden Delft Erasmus Center for Sustainability that I lead. We have a collaboration between the 3 universities in the west of the Netherlands. That is Leiden. That is the Technical University of Delft, the oldest university basically in technical sciences. And we have in Rotterdam, they started out as a business school 100 years ago. So actually we have 3 of the oldest universities in different disciplines. We are a general university, the oldest in the Netherlands, the oldest technical, and the oldest economic university. And we basically have a number of collaborative programs. What I see, what really works well, if you want to change the economy, or if you want to change anything in society, you need to understand the system from an environmental point of view, from an economic point of view, from a social point of view. And I would say we in Leiden really are good in it. If you then want to change things, I heard already waste of energy, you need to think about technologies, you need to think about designs. Delft University of Technology is excellent in that. Things are not going to change in the current society if it's not good business. So you need to understand business models. Then go to Rotterdam University because they have the best business school in the Netherlands and probably even in Europe. And then we all know that the markets are not giving us sustainability, not giving us equality. So you need governance, you need regulations and transitions. And actually all the universities have groups that are very good at that. We actually focus very much on agro-food, circular industries, and cities and regions, because that are things that are really relevant for my part of the country. But as you will see, a lot of this has to do with waste. So maybe next slide. We have to understand that if you do waste management, this is the extended waste hierarchy that we use now in the Netherlands. We want to go to a circular economy. What is that? You want to have smarter product use and manufacturing. If you can actually reduce, not actually using products. Yeah. An example is Paris. You see in black and white in the middle a figure where you basically see a lot of cars in the most famous boulevard of Paris, the Champs-Élysées. A lot of cars. These cars embody a lot of materials. They changed Paris to a much more bike-friendly city. So now the people use public transport and bikes, and car traffic has been reduced. In many ways, that is a good development. And okay, then we don't need you anymore. We don't need waste because we don't have car waste. Yeah, we don't have end-of-life vehicles. Okay, of course, it's not possible to kick all the products out. You will have products, and then you need to extend the lifespan of the materials. You want to refurbish, remanufacture, repurpose the old products. And then you have the more linear economy, and that is only the lowest part of, I would say, waste hierarchy, that you want to recycle and recover. Yeah. So you see there actually an example in the Netherlands, I believe. That is not so good. That is how we recycle, actually recover our construction and demolition waste. We make stone particles of it and we use it for road foundation. That is not upcycling. That is not reusing buildings. That is basically cycling. And then, of course, you have the incinerable waste that also we in the Netherlands put into incinerators. We cannot do anything else with it. Next slide, please. I now want to take you along. We in the Netherlands do actually quite a good job in moving away from, let's say, landfill to recycling and so on. But it wasn't always like that. When I was a little boy in the 1970s, I think we probably didn't do very much better than what I see happening now in Indonesia or many other Asian countries. We had no laws on waste, we had no policies, we had no enforcement. So what happened? We had illegal dumping. Investment in treatment was not profitable because the dumping was much cheaper. Particularly the treatment of hazardous wastes was not profitable. If you can dump hazardous waste, you dump it. If you have to pay $200 a ton, and if you bring it to an incinerator. So what happened? And this is really, that happened in the Netherlands in the 1980s. We found out that this is a new, basically, quarter in the village of Lekkerkerk. We found all of a sudden that the canals had been equalized with hazardous waste. Sand went over it, We built houses over it. And of course, after 10 years, the hazardous waste came up. It started to really smell badly. They found out we had total waste. We had hazardous chemicals. Shockwave through the country. The only thing that we could do is actually get the people out. They went to temporary quarters everywhere, and we had to clean up the soil. You can imagine if that happens in a society, all the people are angry. They ask governments to do something with it. So then in the 1980s, we started with the waste laws, and we started with planning of the enforcement and planning. So we did a number of things. We actually gave state support for building hazardous waste incineration. Why was that? Banks and industry could not invest. They didn't know how much waste is there. They didn't know if the waste was there, if enforcement would work quickly enough to bring the waste to the incinerator. They couldn't be sure about what capacity to build. Can you imagine that a liberal minister at the time signed a statement that he would give state support to a private firm of, I think, $100 million as a guarantee that they would build the incinerator and that they could actually not pay back the loan if it appeared to be not profitable. We had to get the system going like that. Then we started our waste management planning. The waste hierarchy became leading. So prevention, not creating waste, was the ultimate goal. Then reuse. Yeah, so reuse the computer as a computer, or the car as a car, or the battery as a battery. Recycling, that you take the materials out of the product and you reuse the materials. Then incineration, and only as a last resort, landfill. What we then did, and at that point I started to work at the Ministry of Environment in the enforcement department, but they have a lot to do with the waste management department. We set standards. For each waste stream, we set a minimum quality standard for treatment. So let us say that for building and construction materials, we wanted to have recovery. That was a standard. You crush it and you recover. You don't want to landfill it anymore. For packaging waste, we said at least we want to see 60-70% recycling. And only 20 or 30% can go to waste to energy. Because if I would say I want to establish a waste management firm, I want to build an installation, I would need to get a permit. And I only would get the permit if the technology was state of the art for the waste stream that I would focus at. Otherwise, I would not get a permit. Even we had capacity planning. We calculated how much waste would be available and how much capacity for incineration, for instance, would be needed. And why was that? We wanted to avoid overcapacity. We understood that if you have an overcapacity in incineration, incineration is very expensive to build. And once you have the incinerator standing, it's basically, how do you call it, sunk costs. Operating the incinerator is cheap. Building it is super expensive. So if you don't plan the capacity, what is going to happen? And you have incinerators, they go to underbid for waste that otherwise would be recycled. Yeah, so that's why we wanted to have capacity plan. We also implemented extended producer responsibility. We found out that for real recycling of end-of-life vehicles, the revenues of the materials and the secondary components would not pay at that point for the collection and the separation. So we said every car that is sold in the Netherlands, we get a levy of, let's say, at that point, 100 guilders, 50 euros, that goes to Auto Recycling Netherlands, Car Recycling Netherlands. That organization gets a lot of money. They contract recycling firms, and for the collection and the treatment, you don't have to pay anymore. So you get an upfront, actually a deposit system. And we had other things, economic incentives. We made incineration and landfill very expensive. Landfill in principle can be very cheap, but if you ban it for certain waste, or if you levy, let's say, a tax of 200 euro per ton, then all of a sudden recycling becomes cheaper and people will recycle. And of course, we need an enforcement program. We needed to make sure that if people would still dump illegally, they would have a fair chance of being caught and end up in prison. And that literally happened. Next slide, please. We looked a little bit more in depth to what we called priority waste streams. So we said, what are the big and dangerous waste streams? So you get big as building and construction waste. Dangerous could be electronics waste because you have a lot of heavy metals in it, you have a lot of flame retardants and so on. Packaging, plastics. So we had targets for reduction and reuse set by the government. And the interesting thing is, because mind you, the 1980s and the 1990s, the population was very much in favor of stringent environmental measures. I still recall when I was in the ministry, I think the reduction target was 5% initially, and I don't know what the reuse target was. But the parliament said, we need to have more stringent targets. We want to reduce with 10%. You can imagine, if you then are in the ministry and you have such a backing of parliament, you can say to industry, we don't discuss the targets anymore. We only talk with you guys about how to realize the targets. And that was important. Microphone check. Where's the microphone? This one?
The microphone is inbuilt.
Is this the microphone or not?
Yeah. No, microphone is not here. Microphone is inbuilt.
In the screen or not?
Not in there, in the cabinet inside.
Here?
No.
No.
Oh,
that cabinet.
Yeah.
And maybe need to go a bit closer.
I was told that.
I'm coming close. So what we did at that point is that we said, well, for each waste stream, like building and construction, it is clear the targets are very tough. There is no negotiation about the targets. But since the people in the ministry, of course, they are not the ultimate technical specialists. So what we did then is actually inviting all the people in the waste chain and the whole value network. Okay, we need to realize these targets. How are we going to do that best? And then come up with technical solutions, with policy measures. And this is, for instance, when we talked with the car importers in the Netherlands, we don't have an own car industry. They said, well, okay, if you do it like that, if you have a deposit scheme in the beginning that pays for the treatment, we are happy. We can work with that. So for all these waste streams in the 1990s, we make dedicated policy packages. And what you basically see is that extended producer responsibility was actually a key in all these waste streams. So what happened? And that is, for me, magic. In 1985, we were a landfill country. 35% of the waste was landfilled. It is now 2 to 3%, but actually the whole change was done in 10 years. Yeah, 10 years. That was it. With 70% recycling, we are now best in class in Europe. If you add to that waste to energy, we now have 93% recovery. And now we must make the step from recycling to circularity. And that all of a sudden is much more complicated. Next slide, please. Because in all honesty, what we do, construction and demolition waste is one of the biggest waste streams in the Netherlands. What do? We put it through a crusher. We have crushed concrete. We have crushed stones. What do we do with the crushed stones? We use it as road foundation. I mean, that is downcycling. You don't reuse. It is not an example that we are probably going to implement. But after the Second World War in Germany, it was totally bombed. What do you can do there on the slide? They actually make the stones clean, and you can reuse the stones as stones. Of course, this is not feasible in a modern society, but that is real reuse. What we do in the Netherlands is downcycling. The other problem is that we dropped capacity planning in the 1990s because people were saying, okay, the wall has fallen, the Berlin Wall, the Soviet Union has been dismantled, and the only place where we still have a communist economy is the waste management economy in the Netherlands, because they do planning of capacity, and you can produce and you not, and so on. So the government said, well, in a way that makes sense. If Arnold Tukker wants to invest in the next incinerator and he doesn't get the waste, that is his problem. Like anyone who builds a factory and that creates overcapacity. But what does happen now? We build too many incinerators. And what do these incinerator owners now do? They import household waste from other countries, from the UK, from other places. So you get a very weird situation. In Amsterdam, we have a big incinerator that creates a bit of electricity, but most importantly, hot steam. And with the hot steam, we heat houses. We have a steam net, a heat net there. What is going to happen if the UK is not exporting their waste anymore to Amsterdam? We have whole quarters that cannot be heated anymore in the winter. Yeah. So, and of course you can say, okay, that is waste to energy and carbon. But no, it is not carbon neutral. At the end of the day, the waste is incinerated and CO2 goes up into the air. You can say the CO2 is actually, allocated to the early products, but it doesn't matter. There is CO2 going into the air. So there's still a serious risk that prevention and reuse is frustrated to fuel hungry incinerators. Next one, please. I have some other experiences. Actually, I know Southeast Asia pretty well, but I didn't do a lot of waste management there. I did waste management studies in Ireland, Argentina. I recently did a study for the Swiss Ministry of Development Aid on, let's say, terms of reference to look at electronics and electronics recycling in some global south country. And what I see typically in all these countries is the following. If you really want to have a well-working waste management system, you need actually 4 elements. And all these 4 elements are in trouble. You need an institutional policy and legislative framework. Very much like in the 1970s, we didn't even have a waste department in the Netherlands. We didn't have laws. You need to build up that capacity and that, and you need money for it. You need normative requirements and verification and enforcement mechanisms. You need to say this kind of waste has to be treated at least with this and this professional quality. And you need to have people who can check that. And if needs be, put me, if I don't comply with the law, put me out of business. You need to have a professionally functioning collection and treatment system. That costs money. How do you collect the money? If I have waste and Terry owns, has a collection firm and I have to pay him, what do? I dump my waste somewhere in the neighbor's garden or something like that, yeah? Too complicated. So in the Netherlands, what do we have? I pay actually a tax for my house. And then the municipality makes sure that I can deliver my waste for free, yeah? And the other thing that you need to know, I did this study for the Swiss ministry, let's say in Egypt and whatever, and they don't even know how much electronic waste they have. They don't know where it goes. You need to have something like monitoring. So what I see is you need to build up these capacities. And what I did in the project with the Swiss ministry, we built what we call a maturity matrix, where we said on all these 4 aspects, what at this moment, where is the country in its development? In many countries, it's actually level 1, there is nothing. But you have some countries where also already something is happening and so on. And what we see is if you can implement an extended producer responsibility scheme, that is often the key to really get things going. Maybe the next slide. Oh, you go too far, sorry, back. So my experience with a number of these countries is use creative and low investment solutions. What we found in Argentina, for instance, there was a lot of hazardous waste that was not so polluted. Cement kilns, they reach a temperature of 1,000, 1,500 degrees. If you can, for instance, spent waste oil, put put it in cement kiln. That is probably actually a very good treatment mechanism. You don't need to have a dedicated incinerator. The cement kiln owner is happy because you don't have to pay for the fuel and you solve a part of the waste problems. But you also see, out of necessity, the informal sector in countries like in Asia, Southeast Asia, but also in the rest of the global south, is the informal sector is doing already a lot. Well, what's the problem with the informal sector? It is informal, they don't have the quality yet, whatever, but see what they can do right and how you can improve that, build upon that. And I'm pretty, and maybe that's too Western, but I think very much extended producer responsibility can solve a lot. Why? If, for instance, let's say you want to have good treatment of these kind of computers, where are the computers built? Where? Okay, that is China, that's Taiwan, Korea, whatever. They are very reputable firms. If the Philippines would say, we want to have professional treatment of end-of-life computers, why not charge 10 euros per computer to these rich firms? And yeah, give that to a reliable organization that can organize collection and treatment. Yeah. And you even can use that money to build up your policy institutions, your enforcement, and your monitoring. Yeah. So in my view, money is often, and building up the capacity is often a problem in these countries. If you talk for certain waste streams, end-of-life vehicles is probably something similar. They are built by reputable large firms. A lot of these reputable large firms, they want to look good. They work with the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. They work with UNEP and so on and so on. I'm actually working also with the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. I would be very much willing. I'm actually talking with Unilever and some other ones on Friday. Well, if they say it's too difficult to accept extended producer responsibility in the Philippines, I would say maybe I have to call one of your sustainability officers in Europe who works with the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, and we don't find it any problem in Europe. Why can't a reputable big firm that is used to these kind of schemes not actually be willing to help to implement that in the Philippines? You know, use these kind of relations. So in my view, it's largely a governance problem, not so much a technical problem. It's in part an investment problem, and it's also in part a capacity development problem. Now, a few slides about how I think we can maybe work a bit together. Now, let's flip it. Plastics, you know all the basic waste streams. Next one, please. You have to understand, I'm an academic. I worked in a ministry. I worked then for a not-for-profit research organization, and when I was working there, I was used to do short-term consultancy projects, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months. I'm now a professor. What is the job of a professor? And my colleagues, I basically led a big institute of 170 people. We have PhDs that do PhD research, and it usually takes 4 years. So we need projects of that kind of length. We do a lot of educational programs that, and the government pays us money if we deliver master students. That is the main job. Of course, my people, if a bit like 10-15% of the time, if you do practical work, that is good because they learn about practice. But that is more or less what I think the kind of hands-on work we can do directly with an organization like AEB. So you see already, you give out loans, you want to whatever, you have capacity development, but even capacity development, we really have to think very well how an academic institution like us can do these kind of things. Between Leiden, Delft, Erasmus, we have all kind of very interesting master educational programs, PhD programs, no problem. Next slide, please. We also know quite well a number of universities here in the region. I list a few of them in Manila, Bangkok, Indonesia, China. And I think what we can do is twin Leiden, Delft, Erasmus and Asian partners in the field of education and research. And the other thing, and that is maybe beyond waste, what we also are quite good at is assessing, let's say, the socio-economic and environmental and sustainability assessment of investments in a broad sense. So maybe next slide to give a few ideas, and then I'm done. So if you want to have, let's say, a low level, a low threshold kind of collaboration, what we do, we have in our bachelor programs, all the students have to do a 6-month kind of thing that is outside the bachelor. We call it a minor. We run a minor on sustainable development, and the students have to do a little project of a month. Most of the projects are done in student groups in the Netherlands, but we also have worked with actually a university in the Philippines. It is, what is it, Isabella State University in the north of Luzon. And we did actually a project with them on water quality. So we sent 10 of our students to the north of Luzon. The students had to pay the travel and the accommodation. And they were twinned with a group of 10 students from Isabella State. And they did research on how to improve water quality in that region. We did the same with Universitas Indonesia on a biodiversity project. Yeah, so a teacher from us goes to Indonesia with 10 students, they deliver. And you can have a nice collaboration that also helps a little bit, I would say, educational development. And I'm for sure that if we would like to do something like that with King Mongkut's University in Thailand, on a waste subject, we could do that. With the LaSalle University here in Manila on a waste subject, we could do that. We could support master thesis exchange. That already becomes a bit complicated because, like I said, my university is paid for master thesis students that graduate at my university. If they graduate somewhere else, I don't get money. Yeah, that already becomes a bit complex. And what we also could do, and that is where I'm of course talking about with Shanti, is support in co-developing bachelor and master programs with regional university staff. So it could be as simple that maybe a few of our specialists that are happy to go, let's say, for 2 weeks to this part of the world, work with university staff here in the region, and you just have a design week or a master class on developing a new curriculum or a new part of a curriculum that would support maybe capacity development in the field of you guys. The other thing that we can do is twinning research. So what we do quite a lot in Asia, a number of countries have quite a good, I would say, PhD stipend programs. Yeah, so Indonesia has LDPD, China has the Chinese Scholarship Council, and for us it works quite well. These people get money to live in the Netherlands. With LDPD, we even get a tuition fee, and luckily my government pays for every graduate PhD actually quite a lot of money that covers all the tuition with Insight. So of course this is long term, this is 4 years, but particularly with the Indonesians, we make sure that the project is done in collaboration with a former host university in Indonesia. And that is beneficial. You can really develop capacity in this way at a good level. You can organize joint research projects and programs. That is often complex because they need a funding source that covers the European side and the Asian side. I'm lucky that with China it works. The Chinese Academy of Sciences is collaborating with the Dutch funding organization. And every year you can apply for a project in a certain area. And sometimes you're lucky and sometimes not. We can think about organizing a summer or winter school for PhDs, for staff, or master students. And of course, we can think about setting up PhD programs or master programs with Asian partners alongside major investment projects that the Asian Development Bank would do. I can imagine Nusantara as a kind of an example that we hear all the time. It's a huge investment, billions, the new capital of Indonesia. Well, I would say, why not have a program attached to it that learn people from Indonesia how to develop these cities with a good biodiversity, a good quality of life, and so on. And I would say in Leiden Delft Erasmus, we have all the capacity to do so. That's my presentation. Sorry, I get a bit hoarse. And for discussion, I would say.
Yeah. Thank you, Professor Arnold. So I will give the floor to the attendants to raise the question, but maybe I got the first chance to ask. You have mentioned quite a lot on the importance of the EPR.
Yeah.
So of course we know it's driven by the government, but you also mentioned that there's some the big companies like LinkedIn are very interested through the contact with APRA Foundation.
Yeah.
So what's the driving force for this kind of a big company? They're willing to pay for the recycler to collect the waste product from the stream in the upfront, and what kind of the differences in the context? You say there's some difference on the uptaking in European big company as compared to big company in Philippines. What's the differences?
I think what you see all the time, and that's why I think it's so important to understand the background in the 1980s in the Netherlands. There was huge popular pressure on the government to make waste management work because we had these chemicals. You see that extended producer responsibility is always an interplay between government, the private sector that in a way creates the waste, and then you have a third party that is a kind of like managing the waste. There's the extended producer responsible organization. The key for me is that government and the private sector agree that EPR is a good way forward. And I think, again, I have experience in this part of the world, but not good enough to really know all the ins and outs. But my gut feeling is that if you have the big companies that are multinationals, whatever, they are used to this way of working with government in all parts of the world. They officially want to be looked good. Yeah. So I think if in the Philippines you say, well, you know, you have a number of waste streams where you see that a number of the big companies that want to look responsible, like Toyota, a number of big car, Volkswagen, you name them. I think that it should be possible, even if you're, let's say, a government not as powerful as Germany or whatever, or the European Union for that matter. I think you have a good chance if you go into a discussion with these companies, that these companies, yeah, if you create a level playing field for everybody, we can work with that. Yeah. So I think it's a bit, you know, putting a bit pressure on them, starting the discussion, and then hopefully you get it going, and you can implement a law on extended producer responsibility of product XYZ. And I would say the Philippines is an island, so imports and exports you can control them fairly well, particularly of big things like cars and that kind of things. Well, and then it's a matter of having, let's say, a good border guard system, good statistical system. And you probably can say, well, each computer that costs you 10 euros, or what is it, 600 pesos. And with that, we pay for the treatment. What the companies will say, they need to have a reliable treatment system. Okay, that you have to build it up. That's the complexity. But I think that can work.
Thank you. So the floor is open. Please raise your questions, and then we'll let the professor to answer.
Can I have a question?
Sure, of course.
Yeah. Thank you very much. And specifically, I appreciate your study on all that, and your recommendation on this waste to energy thing. It's very clear that the waste to energy is not an approach of energy generation. In fact, it's an approach to manage the waste.
Exactly.
So it should serve the purpose of waste management.
Exactly.
Instead of serving the purpose of energy generation. That's completely wrong. So this I fully agree. And specifically, you mentioned that in fact, too many incinerators were built, and then some owners have to import the waste from other countries. Because in our Asia Pacific areas, for the waste management, we have mainly three different levels. The most advanced are in countries like in China, because these most advanced countries, they are all in these middle income countries. So they can afford slightly higher cost of the waste management. And then specifically in China, the incinerators are built everywhere. Yes, even when we visit some small towns, they are all thinking, oh, okay, we would build incinerators. And then in most of the big cities now, in fact, the fresh waste goes to landfill. In fact, the ratio is very low. In some provinces, like in Guangdong and Fujian, it's almost zero. All goes to incinerator instead. Of course, there's also recycling, but not so complete.
Not so much.
So this is the first level that a lot of incineration dominant, also because of the high land price. So they cannot afford that. And then second is like this not really up middle income country, but they try to manage it. Typically that's in Central West Asian countries, Caucasus countries and some Central West Asian countries. They are trying to build more sanitary landfills. So these sanitary landfills, they put this waterproof on the bottom. They also try to build their methane collection pipes to do their power generation afterwards. For them, their issue is it's very difficult to sustain their operation, a proper operation of their sanitary landfill. Either finally it becomes a downside with their broken, with the waterproof bottom all got broken, or they couldn't really no segregation of the waste and it just randomly dumped there because people there just believe that out of the vision, out of the thoughts, and many governments are still struggling how to do a proper collection to cover most of the people, like in Central West, and they also try to privatize the collection part, which in fact a lot of issues because we financed some wastewater, the solid waste management, but then they privatized. So, but for ADB's fund, we cannot go to private sector. Because it's sovereign fund. So there are a lot of issues like that. And then the third level are in Pacific Island. Basically, people just dump everything, everything in the landfills. So in fact, due to this different level of needs, different affordability, and also different capacity of their institution level. So how we can really move forward, it's definitely case by case, But how you think you can support us from all these different levels?
When I was doing this project for the Swiss people, I was like, oh gosh, indeed, you start from zero, particularly the third level that you indicate, And the Chinese make a big mistake. I mean, that was also obvious. They built the overcapacity in incineration. That was also obvious, And then the minute that they want to start recycling and reuse, they will find the same problems as Amsterdam and some other ones.
So how can we persuade them not to do so many incineration? But what they tell us is they don't have space to do the landfill.
Okay. But like I said, I mean, in a way, we were lucky. As the Netherlands, the same happened in Germany and in Sweden, that we had a time when everybody was convinced we need to actually reduce the amount of waste. That was very much like, if you don't put that up front, particularly in countries like China, you end up like China today. So what we did, literally, with a number of these waste streams, we looked at 8-10 very big voluminous waste streams to look like what can we do with it, how can we best reuse it, recycle it, all these kind of things. And we made dedicated policy packages for that. I'm pretty sure the Chinese can do this. I mean, China is a very well-developed country that do highly complicated things, so they can do that. But apparently, at this moment, the policy incentives are not yet there. It's not in their minds. They don't see the reason for doing that. Incineration is easy. You can put this one in.
Yes.
I mean,
no need segregation at all.
No need for segregation, whatever. Oh, sorry, you used all the critical materials, copper and whatever, but who cares? So maybe that is something, and that is a little bit what I try to do with my scientific colleagues in China. The point is like the resources you know, actually one of the big things that you see happening at the moment is the fight over resources globally. Yeah. So maybe that can convince China that if they can become more resource efficient by actually reusing the resources that they have in their infrastructure, whatever, in a better way, that they need to compete less with us, with the West. Yeah.
What would you like? Tea or coffee or water?
Coffee with milk, if you have that. Yeah, and water as well.
Water and tea, coffee with milk. Yeah, and just have water. Okay.
Yeah, so I think that is basically it. You almost have to convince the Chinese that if they can, I'm almost see now an idea for a paper, like look at waste management in China today and how it could be optimal if you really would apply, let's say, the dust perspectives and that kind of things. And the amount of resources that they say. Actually, I had a PhD from China that was CEC candidate, and she did it for copper. Yeah? And we looked at the improvement potential for reuse of copper, and it was really a massive difference because copper is not mined in China. Hey, they need to import less. Simple as that. You know, that is one adage less for the government. You know, so maybe that's the way to discuss with China. That you probably know the work of the International Resource Panel. That you know, so and I can be in contact with a lot of influential people in China, but they should bring out this message. You know, and there are a few influential professors that could do this kind of work in China. And I think that really would be helpful. That, so that is maybe then China, let's say that. And then you have all these other countries, and there it becomes, I would say, complex. Because like I said, I mean, if you go back to the slide where I said, okay, you miss the institutional capacity, you miss the enforcement, you miss the technical capacity, you rely on the informal sector, and you don't have any monitoring.
Nothing.
There's nothing. And then, yeah, I think the point is, I think that you need to have a financing mechanism to get things going. And that's why I think that producer responsibility is an important thing. We in the Netherlands had these mechanisms like, okay, everybody who lives in a house, owns a house, pays municipal taxes. I don't know where that happens here, if that's easy to collect or whatever. But as a part of my municipal taxes, I pay for my waste management. So in this way, actually the people that need the money to do the waste management get their money. And that is a big thing. If you do it private, my goodness, I see it happening. There's a private firm. I was talking with some Indonesians, and I don't. But what is privatized? Even sewage is private. Everything is privatized, and then you know, and who can pay that? You know, of course, no one. You know, and yeah, so that are the kind of things that that somehow you need to get organized. So, and not to say that I didn't put it in the slides, but when I was in Argentina, well, we were indeed standing on this huge landfill that now by some satellite is designated as the biggest sea. It's 4 emitter. Emitter in Latin America. I'm pretty sure Jakarta has the same problem, also a huge landfill. And then we were with a little person, we get, oh, and by the way, there's a small landfill, that is illegal. Why don't you send the police there? Oh. No, but actually this landfill seems to be controlled by the police. That is their additional job. You know, that, so yeah, these kind of things. And that is, for me, you know, I have to be honest. I mean, that is, we don't have these experiences, how these kind of, and to get away from that level of complexity to something that is a kind of managed, that is super complex. So you probably have to start in certain countries with making sure that at least you have a controlled landfill. That is so, and then hopefully with external producer responsibility, you can tackle a number of waste streams. And you also have to look like maybe that I mean, the informal sector can be important. I mean, I don't know how it is. Maybe that waste monitoring, just getting an idea where the waste is generated, how it's treated. I mean, that is another thing. That could be a project to start with. When I worked in Ireland, we had no clue where the hazardous waste is going. So I used all kinds of tricks, like how much motor oil for cars is being sold. There are statistics about it. Okay, you know a little bit how much is used, and then you know, okay, if let's say 90,000 tons is sold, we should have 70,000 tons in the waste stage. How much is collected? So 10,000. Oh, we have a big problem. You know, there's a huge difference. We can do these kind of things. I mean, that is doable. And then it becomes interesting to see what people are doing already themselves. I mean, I can imagine that a lot of the engineering waste is actually recycled by, by people themselves because it's a resource for them. Okay, then maybe you can take that away. You can look a little bit at maybe the plastics is a big problem, maybe something else. Well, then maybe put in deposit systems on plastics and a lot of things like that. I mean, that may be possible, I don't know. But yeah, it is very much having, and I have to be honest, I mean, I have some experience in Asia, but I have no clue how things work in practice here, of course. I mean, maybe even you guys, you also work in the Asian Development Bank, in the good part of Manila. What is happening somewhere? How is it behave? I mean, you know, that is what you really have to understand. And from there,
Do you have anything to ask?
yeah, you have to start things going.
She has something to.
Yeah.
She has a head of the West University financing from private sector. Now it's like changing the mindset
Right.
now.
Yeah,
Coming to us.
Yeah, so no, thank you, Professor Tukker. I really relate to a lot of the points that Jingming was sharing about the overcapacity in some countries like the PRC in terms of incineration investment, and then whereas in some other countries we have been working in there's an insufficient
Basic things are
enforcement.
that's
Going back to the point on governance, right? So before we can even get to the point of treatment, we're lacking that collection and waste segregation. And so we're experiencing a lot of severe damages to biodiversity, marine debris entering into the oceans. And so with that, that requires behavior change, right? To look at banning the open dumping, direct environmental degradation, and then with the enforcement that's needed from the government for environmental protection, and then looking at financing incentives that can induce the recycling behaviors and collection to take place. So I think right now for many countries that we work in, there's certainly a need for more. I think the twinning idea is very good because that helps to also bring some capacity around the governance frameworks that can be in place, and also any types of financing mechanisms which we can introduce in the countries. And then working, of course, you need a lot of collaboration, not just at the national level, but at the community level, because that's where you get the point source pollution to be controlled, right? So my question is really going back to you on the governance piece, because I think we have a lot of great, fantastic, technical solutions.
I mean, the solutions are there. I mean,
yes, that's right.
Technology has been developed.
That's right. We see a lot of good technologies from developed Asia as well as in Europe, US and other places. But I think it's the part on the policy innovation and the governance that how do we come up with new tools that can be utilized by local governments to enable the uptake on circular economy, uptake on enforcement on preventing this open dumping into our rivers and oceans. That's what I was keen to hear your thoughts on, because Netherlands is very much, I think, been able to harness.
Then again, we are a very developed country, so and even we have problems that we still have littering and that kind of things. Okay, now.
Sorry, Professor, I have to leave.
You have to leave because it's 5 o'clock.
And so after that, will you still be available? Maybe.
I mean the next days. I mean, particularly tomorrow, I only have a program between 9 and 11. So if
maybe
you want to plug in, if you want to plug in more time, then I'm happy to spend time with you.
That would be great.
One more thing. Sorry, I see one hand raised before is Xingren. Xing, is you still here? So please give the last questions to Professor, or you have to knock his door.
Yeah. Thank you.
Please.
It's now not really question, but actually comments on Jingming's question, and also the just the last question from the lady about the policy. Jingming asked, how can we persuade China over incineration to reduce? I want to answer, because this is not about persuasion. The reason that they have over incineration is exactly because of national policy has a subsidy for incineration, for waste to energy. Yes, and then that subsidy is take the form of premier on top of the feed-in tariff on the power generated from incineration. So then that premier is paid by the grid, not by the local government, and the grid is state-owned enterprise or state-owned. So that's why the local government don't feel the pain, don't need to pay for incineration. So it's paid by the grid, and then the electricity sale income accounts for 3/4 of the total income of all the incinerators in China. And even now is more than 70% coming from this electricity sale. So which means coming from the subsidy, coming from the central or the provincial or regional coffer, not from the local government. So it shows that waste management is a local problem to be solved by local government, but actually hugely affected by the national policy, especially on economic, financial subsidy. So I think that I fully agree with Professor. It's really a governance issue. It's about maturity, about sophistication to understand. And then some other country like Vietnam now is learning from China. They are proposing same subsidies through the feed-in tariff, and then about the same level. Is really hefty subsidy, about 1/4 of the feed-in tariff in some provinces in China, and then about the same in Vietnam. So if they go down the same way, they will see overcapacity soon. So I think that's really the thing that we need to look at, not just general policy, general regulation, but related to the bottom line of the business, of the economic subsidy, all these. Thank you.
And maybe Mrs. Ren or Sig Ren, I think, is it really that maybe that the electricity is seen as carbon free and that is giving additional subsidies or something like that? Or what is happening there?
Yeah, that's exactly the argument. In China, waste to energy considered renewable energy. Well, in Europe, it's not. And so they enjoy the subsidy.
I see. And I think that's almost a design flaw in basically the carbon agreements. It goes that far, And now we understand much better. Thanks a lot. This is very insightful, because the point is, what you see then, if let's say the climate targets say that electricity generated from waste is carbon neutral, of course. What you then get through is, indeed, then as a government, you say, okay, we give an additional premium for it, you get your carbon credits back, that kind of thing, and then you get this, Frankly, this is lunatic, because the carbon credits that you would have for recycling paper and these kind of things should be much higher, but there are no carbon credits. So, okay, we never did that for that reason.
So that will be the incentive for not doing the proper waste management, right? Increase the waste and get the more carbon credit.
Exactly.
That's
what you get.
That's the very wrong
I want
way
to have all your paper and all your plastic and get it to my incinerator, because then have carbon neutral energy.
And then the incinerator people will keep marketing on that basis.
But I'm very, very grateful for this comment, because it goes exactly also what you said. You have to look at the financial incentives and how they work out.
Right.
The problem with waste is it's not a market. There is no market for waste. It's waste.
It's a waste, right?
So what we did very carefully with regulation and with financial incentives, we created kind of like, okay, it made all of some sense to bring my car to the recycling organization, because I don't have to pay for it and all this kind of stuff. I get even maybe a little bit of money back. Yeah. And that I paid €100 upfront for my car, additional, that goes to, I don't even feel it, it's not even visible in the price anymore. Where in the past, it literally went to a guy with a plot of land, and he had maybe 20 old cars, and if I needed a new door, I went there, and you can imagine the oil goes into the land. Horrible. No, this. Okay, we changed the system, and with that incentives, and that's it. So I think very much I agree with both of you. The governance thing is important. And you really have to think about how can you build a financial system almost that makes it happen. I don't believe a lot in enforcement. Enforcement is difficult.
You need the carrot.
You need the carrot. You need to build it. That's why I think extended producer responsibility is one of the key things.
Yeah, so may I say, because we only booked 1 hour, and then there's a lot of intensive discussion among the ladies, especially. I know the men are quite silent. But anyway, let's we have a professor here. He will be still in our headquarters for a few days. Yeah. So if you want, and we share his contact with you. Some offline discussion.
Yeah.
And then definitely we also want to do some advertisement next.
Next session, financial sustainability of the solid waste management.
I think that's important. So we need to consider all these carbon credit things in the financial sustainability, not just the premium for the fee interview. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you all.
Thank you very much. Thank you.